Hi everyone and welcome to a new video on the CBI channel. In this Django for Beginners tutorial series, we're creating a blog-style web application with Python Django. And this web application will allow users to sign up and to sign in, but also to create, to edit, and also to delete different blog posts. Now, this is not the first video in this series. In fact, we've already done 9 before. And after those videos, our application looks like this, where we have a homepage where we can already see the news articles coming in after they are created. And we have the option to go to the My Blog Post page and create different blog posts. Now, in this video, we're going to continue and we're going to make sure that we can edit the blog post that we have created. To realize that, we'll follow 4 steps. First, we're going to be creating a new HTML template, URL, and a view for editing records, so that we have everything in order to edit the records that have been created. Next, we're going to make sure that we can get to the edit page from the home page, so that the different users can just click a button to edit the articles. As a next step, we'll make sure that the form that we also have for creating records is pre-populated with the data from the correct record. And then when a user submits it, we will make sure that the changes are correctly stored in our database. So we are now inside of our code. And the first thing that I would like to do is create a separate template for our edit page. And right now I'm just going to copy over the create page and I'm going to rename this as the edit.html page. And we are going to be changing the title from create a blog post to edit a blog post. And let's save this now. Now, for now, we're just going to let the form remain on the page, but we will need to make sure in the view that data is pre-populated inside of this form. But we'll take care of that later. Now, next to having an HTML template that will display all of the components to the user, we also need the view, because in the view, we handle all of the different actions and we also specify what we want to display to the user. So below the function we have for creating records, we're going to be creating a new one for editing records. So I'm going to do dev and then say edit. And this time we'll take in not one element right here, which is request, which we will also need for edit, but we also want an ID. Now, the reason for this is when we go and edit this blog post right here, we want it to take us to the page for this specific blog post. And we can identify specific blog posts with the unique identifier that they get in the database. So, for example, the one that we've just seen has the identifier of number 6. So ideally, when we go to a different page, we also make sure that we send the identifier with the request to edit it. So we know exactly which data we want to edit, and we can also correctly pre-populate the form. So that means that we also need the ID in this particular view. Now, for now, I'm just going to set the context here equal to some curly brackets, and we can do a return render and then say that we want to return the request. And we also want to get this link right here. So we want to link to a certain template, which is not the create template, but the edit template. And we also want to send the context. And what we can also already do is state that the form that we're going to be using is going to be the blog form, because that's the form that we currently have for filling in the blog model. And then we can also maybe already copy over this context so that we bring that form to the template. That also makes sense because I believe that is also already named right here. So we need the form to be there anyway. All right, so for now, this view is complete. And later on, we will make sure that we can add some logic that is going to pre-populate the form with the correct row and also that we can submit the data correctly. So next step is creating the URL. And that is going to be a little bit different than what we have done before. Because of course, we can just copy over this path of create. But what I just mentioned is that we do not just want to have a link that specifies that we want to edit, but we also want to receive the ID of the record that we want to edit. So what we will do is we're going to add a parameter to this URL. So I do a slash, and then we specify that we want to receive an integer inside of this link, which is equal to pk, which is the primary key. And let's close this off like this. And of course, we now need to point this to the correct view, which is going to be the edit view. And we can also give it the name of edit. And how this will exactly work will become very clear in the next step. So for now, we are complete because we have a URL, we have a view, and also a template. But now we need to get to this edit page and make sure that we can actually do something. So what we now want to do is we want to go from this post right here to a page that specifies the same logic as in the URL. So we want to make sure that we go to /edit and then also that we receive the ID of the particular record. So in this case, we want to receive the ID of 6. So let's do that right now. To make sure that we can get a link, we need to make an adjustment to the home.html page because that's where we have these articles that we also created in the previous videos. So below the actual content, which is right here, I want to have some buttons that tell us that we can go to the edit page. So I'm going to put a new div below the actual article content, and I'm going to give this a class name, which is equal to article buttons. And let's not do it with this a like this. Now in here, I want to have the link to the edit page. So we can say that we have an a tag, and the text in the link is going to be edit. Now for this a tag, we also want to provide the link, which is the href. And then we can do some curly brackets and some percentage signs. And similar to the other links that we've created earlier, we can specify URL and then say that we want to go to edit, because edit is also the name that we see in the URL right here. It's referring to this. And then we can provide the thing that needs to come next. Because in our URL, you can see that we want to receive the number, which is going to be the primary key, which refers to the field of ID. So what we can do, since we are iterating over these different blocks, is we can refer to the blog.id, because that will use the number inside of the blog post model of ID as the reference to the create page. So that should work just fine. And if I now save this and we start our terminal again, so we now have an edit link, not completely in the right place, but if we hover over it, on the bottom left, you will see that it goes to /edit and then /6. And also if I click this, you notice that it goes to edit and then 6. So that part is now working fine. And later on, we will, of course, also fix this error. But let's first fix the weird placing of the link on the right-hand side. And the reason is that I actually want to put this div in this article content section because it needs to be below the actual content. So we can do it like this, where we have the article buttons straight underneath of the content. And now when we refresh this, indeed, we see that the edit link is below the actual content. Now I also want to make this look a little bit more like a button. And we already saw in the previous video that we can do that with some simple commands for Bootstrap. So inside of the href, I give it a class. And that class is going to be called button and then button outline primary. And let's save that. And now you notice that it becomes actually a nice button, which is outlined and which does not have the blue color at the beginning, but does have it when you select it. And that seems to be fine for now. The second issue is if I go to the edit page, it says that it got an unexpected keyword argument called pk. Now, I just done some checking, and reason for that is that in our urls.py file, we indeed mention that we expect an integer called pk. So it's going to call whatever comes next to edit as pk. But in our views.py file, we actually call it id. So we need to call this pk. And now if I refresh this, it works fine. But now we have this edit a blog post page, but actually it should pre-populate this blog post with the right information from this particular row with the ID of 6. So let's now fetch the data using the ID in the link and pass that to this form so that we actually see the correct data. So the way to do that is that we're going to do another query. So we say that the blog is going to be equal to the blog post dot objects dot get. And the reason that we use get is that we only want to return one record. So you use filter when you want to return multiple records, but if you only want to get one, you use get. And in there, we can say that the ID field inside of our blog post model needs to be equal to whatever the primary key is from this link. So we do ID is equal to PK. And this is going to fetch the correct data for us. Now, to test that, we can actually put this blog instance inside of the form. And doing that is actually really easy. We can say that instance is equal to blog. And just like that, it is going to place the data from the row that we get from blog into our existing form. So let's now check what happens if we save this and we go to the page. And if we refresh this, you notice that we indeed see the text of this is the first blog post and this is the content of our first blog post. And that is exactly the information that we also have right here. So this seems to be working fine. Now you already noticed that from our homepage that the ID that we specify for the edit link, so the number 6, is going to then be right here in our URL, which means that we can then use it inside of our view, and we can use that to fetch the correct object and pass it to the form. So those IDs in the link are actually very important for editing this record. So now we have this thing here, and I want to make all different kinds of changes. However, I don't have the logic yet for submitting this. So let's also put that inside of the view. Now, actually, it can be really similar as before. So the first thing that we would do is we're going to check if someone is submitting the data. And what you can remember from the previous video where we did the create page, we do that by doing if request.method is equal to post, because that tells us that someone is trying to populate data in our database. Then we can define the actual form again, similar as what we did right here. So we can copy over this line from the create page where we state that form is equal to the blog form and we want to request that posted. However, we now also need to specify for what instance we are posting it. Because, yeah, we already recognize the instance here. So we also need to mention it here so we know what record we are updating. So in here we specify that instance that we want to update is equal to blog. Then we can do the same thing as what we also did for the create page, and we can validate if everything that is in the form is actually correct. So we do if form that is underscore valid, then we want to save it, and we can do form that save. And just like that, it is going to save the changes that we made in that form. Now we can also then go back to the homepage because we want to immediately see the results. So we can do a return redirect, and we are going to redirect in this case to the homepage. So let's now check if this works if we want to update one of the forms. So we're going to go back to the homepage, and here we have this is the first blog post. And now I want to change this because what we actually want is have an actual article there. So to do that, we went to the BBC site and there's a nice article on the Newcastle striker of Alexander Isak. So we're going to copy over the title and put it as the title of this blog post. And then also let's change the content. So because we have lovely content right here that talks about his transfer. And now we can submit this. And what should happen is that this record with the ID of 6 should still exist, but then with the input that I put here for the title and the content. So we're now back to the homepage, and you can now see that indeed the value here has changed. So it has changed it to the Newcastle striker determined to join Liverpool, and also with the information right there. And also inside of our database, when we now refresh this, you notice that it has changed the title and the content. So this seems to be working fine. It's correctly updating our data. And that is actually all for this video. In this video, I showed you how we can edit these different records inside of our database. In the next video, we're going to continue and I'm going to show you how we can delete different records. I want to thank you very much for watching. If you've enjoyed it, please leave a like and subscribe. and hope to see you in the next one. Bye bye.